Colton Rives flicked a folded $100 bill across the table without looking at her and said, "Here, that should cover your silence. Unless you have a stock tip worth more than your shift." The bill slid across the polished marble and stopped just short of her hand, not quite reaching. A few men at the table let out low, approving chuckles, the kind that never rose above the level of the man paying the check. Crystal glasses caught the city lights, reflecting them in fractured gold across tailored sleeves and expensive watches. Zariah Voss did not reach for the bill. She stood still, tray balanced lightly against her palm, posture straight, eyes steady but not challenging. The rooftop air carried a thin edge of wind that brushed past the table, lifting the corner of a napkin, stirring nothing else. Colton finally looked up, slow, deliberate, his gaze passing over her as if scanning a line item. "Well," he added, tapping 2 fingers against the table, not impatient, just accustomed to being answered. She met his eyes for a brief second, then lowered her gaze to the glass she had just set down, adjusting it by less than an inch. "Would you like anything else, sir?" Her voice was even, measured, neither warm nor cold. One of the men leaned back in his chair, smirking. "I think he already asked you something," he said, glancing at Colton for approval. Another man swirled his drink, watching the exchange with quiet interest, as if waiting for a performance. Colton leaned back, draping one arm over the back of his chair, claiming space without effort. "I did," he said. It was a simple question. He gestured loosely toward the skyline, where towers blinked with red aircraft lights, and distant traffic traced thin lines of white and gold below. "People up here deal in numbers that move cities," he continued. "Thought you might want to try." The table responded with another ripple of laughter, softer this time, more controlled. Zariah shifted her weight slightly, the tray still steady in her hand. Her uniform was pressed but worn at the seams, the kind of detail that only showed under certain light. She did not look at the other men. She did not look at the bill. "Markets open at 9:30, she said quietly, almost as if she were stating a fact to herself. The words did not carry far, but they landed. Colton's fingers paused against the table for a fraction of a second, then resumed their slow tapping. "So you do listen," he said, a faint smile pulling at the corner of his mouth. "Good. Then listen carefully." He leaned forward just enough to close the distance by an inch, not more. "When someone like me asks you a question, it is not a conversation. It is an opportunity." His tone remained calm, almost instructive, as if offering advice rather than delivering a line. Zariah nodded once, a small, controlled motion. "I understand," she replied. She reached for the empty glass nearest to him, replacing it with a fresh one, her movements precise, unhurried. The new glass touched the table without a sound. The city hummed below them, distant and indifferent. Colton watched her for a moment longer than necessary, as if waiting for something else, something that would justify the attention he had already given. When nothing came, he exhaled through his nose, dismissing the moment with the same ease he had created it. "Get the manager," he said, waving his hand slightly, already turning back to his guests. Zariah inclined her head. "Yes, sir." She turned without haste, the tray still balanced, her steps quiet against the stone floor. Behind her, the laughter resumed, louder now, filling the space she had just left. The $100 bill remained on the table, untouched, its edge fluttering once in the wind before settling flat again. The service hallway door closed behind Zariah with a soft click that barely carried over the hum of refrigeration units and distant kitchen chatter. The noise from the rooftop faded into a muffled blur, like it came from somewhere far removed. She did not slow down at first. Her steps stayed measured, heel to toe, the tray still balanced, until she reached the stainless steel prep counter near the service station. Only then did her hand lower, just enough for the edge of the tray to touch metal. It made a faint sound, sharper than she expected. She paused. Not long, just a fraction longer than necessary. Her fingers adjusted their grip, repositioning the weight as if correcting for something unseen. A line cook brushed past her carrying a pan, not looking, moving on instinct and routine. "You good?" he asked without stopping. Zariah nodded once, though he was already gone. She reached for a clean cloth and wiped a spot on the counter that did not need wiping, her movements precise, controlled, each motion finishing completely before the next began. "The manager," A man named Victor Hale stepped out of his office at the end of the hallway, already scanning the floor with a tight expression. "Table 12, he asked. Zariah lifted her gaze, meeting his for a brief second. "He asked for you," she said. Victor exhaled through his nose, straightening his jacket as if preparing for impact. "Of course he did." He hesitated, then added, "Everything all right out there?" Zariah's eyes shifted past him for a moment, toward the narrow window that showed only a slice of the city, a thin strip of moving headlights far below. Her lips parted slightly, then closed. "Yes," she said, voice even. Victor studied her face for a beat longer than usual, then nodded, already turning toward the stairs that led back up. "I will handle it." Zariah picked up the tray again, lighter now, and moved to the rack of polished glasses. She selected one, then another, aligning them on the tray with careful spacing. Her hands were steady, but the rhythm was different, a fraction slower, as if each placement required a second thought. From the kitchen doorway, a server whispered to another, casting a quick glance in her direction before looking away. The air carried the scent of citrus cleaner and seared meat, familiar and grounding. Zariah inhaled once, shallow, then again, deeper, her shoulders settling into their usual line. She checked the order slip clipped to the tray, though she already knew it by memory. Table 7, 2 refills, no ice. Table 9, dessert menus. Routine. She turned back toward the hallway that led upstairs. The closer she moved to the door, the clearer the rooftop sounds became again, laughter cutting through glass and music, voices layered with confidence. Her pace did not change. At the threshold, she paused just long enough to adjust the cuff of her sleeve, smoothing a crease that had formed near her wrist. The fabric resisted slightly, then fell into place. Her hand lingered there for a second, fingers pressing lightly against the seam, before dropping back to the tray. When she pushed the door open, the night air met her again, cooler now, carrying the same distant hum of the city. The table with Colton was still loud, still centered, still untouched by anything that had happened moments before. The $100 bill remained where it had landed, flat against the marble, as if it had always belonged there. Zariah did not look at it as she stepped back onto the floor. She moved past it, toward table 7, her focus narrowing to the glasses on her tray, the steps ahead, the next quiet action waiting to be completed. The tray remained steady as Zariah reached table 7, but her grip shifted slightly, her thumb pressing a little harder against the edge as she set down the first glass. The couple seated there barely looked up, their conversation continuing in low tones, uninterrupted, as if service existed on a separate layer from their evening. She poured the water slowly, watching the level rise to just below the rim, then moved to the second glass. The motion was familiar, practiced, but her timing was a fraction off, the pour ending a second later than usual before she caught it and stopped. She adjusted the glass by a hair, aligning it with the knife beside it. Small corrections, invisible to most. As she turned toward table 9, the sound of Colton's laughter cut through the air again, sharper this time, carrying across the rooftop without effort. It was not directed at her anymore, but it did not need to be. It settled into the space the same way his earlier words had, lingering without invitation. Zariah did not turn her head. Her steps continued in a straight line, measured, even, but her eyes flicked once toward the reflection in the window beside the bar. For a brief second, she saw the table behind her, blurred by glass and light, Colton's silhouette leaning forward, hands moving as he spoke, the others angled toward him. He was still the center of it. She looked away before the image settled. At table 9, she placed the dessert menus down one by one, smoothing the corners against the table surface. The edge of one menu lifted slightly in the breeze, and she pressed it flat with 2 fingers, holding it there a moment longer than necessary before letting go. "Anything else I can get for you tonight?" she asked. Her voice remained even, but there was a thin layer beneath it now, something quieter, more deliberate, as if each word had been placed before it was spoken. The woman at the table smiled politely and declined. Zariah nodded once and stepped back, her posture straight, her shoulders aligned, but her breathing had shifted, just enough to deepen between movements. She moved toward the service station near the bar, where a stack of clean napkins waited. She picked one up, then another, folding them along their creases with precise pressure, edges meeting exactly. The repetition steadied her hands. From the corner of her eye, she saw Victor approaching Colton's table, his posture attentive, his expression carefully neutral. Colton did not stand. He did not need to. He spoke without looking up, one hand gesturing loosely, the other resting near the untouched bill. Victor nodded, leaning in slightly, absorbing each word as if it carried weight beyond volume. Zariah's fingers paused mid-fold, just for a beat, the napkin held between them. She resumed, completing the fold, placing it back onto the stack. Her gaze lowered to the surface of the station, focusing on the clean lines, the symmetry, the order that could be controlled. Around her, the rooftop continued its rhythm, glasses clinking, voices rising and falling, the city stretching endlessly beyond the glass railings. She adjusted the position of the napkin stack by less than an inch, aligning it with the edge of the counter. Then she lifted the tray again, the weight familiar, grounding. As she turned back toward the floor, her eyes passed over Colton's table once more, not stopping, just registering the arrangement, the space, the distance between where he sat and where she stood. The difference was not loud. It did not need to be. It was built into every gesture, every glance, every moment that passed without acknowledgement. Zariah stepped forward, back into motion, her pace steady, her expression composed, carrying the next set of tasks with the same quiet precision, even as the space around her remained tilted in ways no one else seemed to notice. Zariah steadied the tray against her palm as she approached the service station again, her steps measured, but not as automatic as before. The rhythm of the room had shifted, subtle but present, like a note slightly out of tune. Victor was still at Colton's table, his posture angled inward, listening, nodding, absorbing. Colton did not look at him when he spoke. He did not need to. His voice carried just enough to reach the surrounding tables, low but firm, a tone that expected compliance before it was even given. Zariah stopped at the edge of the station, her hand hovering briefly over the stack of order slips. Just for a second, her fingers did not move. Her eyes lowered to the counter, tracing the faint line where two metal panels met, as if steadying herself before moving. Then she reached for a pen. She wrote a note on a blank slip, the motion deliberate, the ink pressing slightly deeper into the paper than necessary. Her hand paused at the end of the line, the tip of the pen resting there for a beat before she set it down. She picked up the folded slip, holding it between her fingers, not tight, not loose. From across the floor, Victor glanced toward her, a quick check, a silent question. Zariah met his gaze for a fraction of a second, then looked past him, toward the table. The $100 bill was still there, untouched, flat against the marble, its presence louder now than before. She stepped forward. Each movement was controlled, but there was a slight delay between intention and action, a half beat where her body seemed to weigh the step before taking it. The closer she moved, the clearer the voices became again, the laughter, the low conversation, the ease of people who had never needed to consider their place in the room. Victor straightened as she approached, shifting slightly to make space, his expression tightening as if anticipating something he could not name. Colton's hand lifted briefly, dismissing the end of his sentence, and then his eyes flicked up, catching her presence. Not fully, just enough to register that she had returned. Zariah did not speak immediately. She placed the tray down on the edge of the table, the contact soft but intentional. The sound was just enough to draw a glance from one of the men seated beside Colton. Her hand moved to the empty glass nearest him. She adjusted it by less than an inch, aligning it with the edge of the table, then set a fresh glass beside it with quiet precision. She did not touch the bill. The folded slip remained in her other hand. She placed it neatly beside the check presenter area, aligning it parallel to the table's edge, as if it were part of the service sequence, nothing more. For a brief moment, her fingertips rested near the paper, then lifted away. Colton's gaze sharpened, his attention narrowing in a way it had not before, not recognition, not understanding, just a shift from dismissal to irritation. His fingers tapped once against the table, slower now. "Is there a problem?" he asked, his tone still even, but thinner at the edges. Zariah lifted her eyes to meet his. Not for long, just enough to complete the exchange. "No, sir," she said. Her voice remained steady, but there was a weight beneath it now, something measured and chosen. She did not move the bill. She did not reach for it. She simply stood there for a second longer than required, the space holding the action between them. Victor's posture stiffened beside her, his attention flicking between the two, calculating, waiting. The other men at the table had gone quiet, not fully, but enough that their earlier ease had shifted into something more watchful. Zariah lifted the tray again, her movements precise, controlled, but not rushed. She turned without haste, leaving the bill exactly where it lay and the slip aligned as part of her work. Behind her, the air tightened, the conversation not yet resumed, the balance of the table slightly altered, though no one had named it. She walked back toward the service station, her steps steady, her shoulders aligned, carrying the same quiet composure, even as the room around her leaned subtly in a different direction than before. The moment Zariah stepped away, the silence behind her did not last long, but it changed shape. It was no longer casual. It was pointed. Colton did not raise his voice, but when he spoke again, it cut through the table with a precision that did not need volume. "Victor," he said, not looking at him. "I asked for service, not commentary." Victor shifted his weight slightly, his posture tightening as he glanced toward the slip Zariah had placed beside the bill. His hand hovered over it for a second, uncertain, then withdrew. "Of course, Mr. Rives," he replied, his tone controlled, careful. "There must have been a misunderstanding." Colton's fingers tapped once against the marble, slower now, deliberate. "There was," he said. The men at the table watched without speaking, their earlier amusement replaced by a quiet attentiveness, as if something more valuable than entertainment was now at stake. Zariah reached the service station, but she did not immediately pick up another task. Her hand rested on the edge of the counter, fingers lightly curled against the cool metal. For a brief moment, her shoulders rose with a deeper breath than before, then settled. Her gaze lowered, not to avoid, but to focus, tracing the faint reflection of overhead lights in the steel surface. Behind her, Victor's voice continued, softer now, explaining, smoothing, absorbing the tension like it was part of his role. "I will take care of it," he said. "It will not happen again." Zariah's jaw tightened just slightly, a movement so small it would have gone unnoticed if anyone had been looking directly at her. She picked up a clean glass from the rack, then another, placing them on the tray with careful spacing, but her timing was off by a fraction, each movement carrying a slight delay, as if her body was recalibrating under pressure. A server passed behind her, slowing just enough to glance toward the table, then toward Zariah, before continuing on. The look was quick, unreadable, but it lingered in the air longer than it should have. Zariah reached for the order slips, flipping through them once, then again, though she already knew the sequence. Her fingers paused on one, then moved past it, then returned, selecting it with a controlled motion. The small repetition did not escape her. She adjusted her grip on the tray, the weight grounding, but not fully steadying. From across the floor, Colton finally looked in her direction, not directly at her, but toward the space she occupied, his gaze passing over as if assessing something that had shifted out of place. "Have her come back," he said, his tone flat, controlled. Victor hesitated for a fraction of a second before turning. His eyes found Zariah immediately. There was no signal, no gesture, just a look that carried instruction and expectation at the same time. Zariah met it, then looked past him, toward the edge of the rooftop where the city stretched out in lines of moving light. Her lips pressed together briefly, then released. She adjusted the cuff of her sleeve again, a small motion, slower this time, as if her fingers needed a second to complete the task. Then she lifted the tray. Each step back toward the table felt measured against something heavier than before, the space between her and Colton no longer neutral, but charged, defined. Conversations around her softened as she passed, not stopping, just thinning, the awareness spreading quietly from one table to the next. She stopped at the edge of Colton's table, the tray balanced, her posture aligned, but her breathing deeper now, controlled, deliberate. Victor stepped slightly aside, giving her space, but not distance. Colton did not gesture this time. He simply watched, his expression unchanged, his presence filling the space without effort. "I believe you had more to say," he said. The words were not loud, but they settled over the table with weight. Zoraya's fingers tightened briefly around the edge of the tray, then relaxed. Her gaze lowered for a fraction of a second, then lifted, not fully meeting his, but not avoiding him either. The space held. No one moved. The city continued below, indifferent, while above, the air pressed in, waiting for something to give, but nothing did. The space around the table held still, not frozen, but suspended, like the moment just before something shifts but has not yet decided how. Zoraya did not answer immediately. Her fingers rested along the edge of the tray, not gripping, not loose, just placed there as if they belonged to the object more than to her. The faint hum of the city filtered through the glass barrier behind Colton, a steady current that did not rise or fall, indifferent to what unfolded above it. Her breath came in quietly, slower now, drawn deeper than before, then held for a fraction of a second before releasing without sound. Her gaze lowered, not to avoid him, but to the line where the marble table met the metal trim, following it for a brief moment as if it offered direction. Then her eyes lifted again, not fully meeting his, but no longer passing over him either. Colton leaned back slightly, his posture relaxed, but his attention sharpened, no longer dismissive, not yet respectful, simply focused in a way that measured rather than ignored. His fingers stopped tapping. The stillness of his hand carried more weight than the movement had. Around them, the other men remained quiet, their earlier ease replaced by a subtle restraint, each glance shorter, each movement more contained, as if the air itself had narrowed. Victor stood just behind Zoraya's shoulder, not touching, not speaking, but present, his silence filled with expectation. Zoraya's thumb shifted slightly against the tray, a small adjustment that aligned her grip, grounding it. Her shoulders settled into a straighter line, not forced, just chosen. For a moment, nothing moved. The bill lay between them, its edge catching a faint ripple of wind, lifting and settling again, the folded slip beside it unmoved. Zoraya's eyes flicked to it for less than a second, then returned forward. Her lips parted slightly, then closed again, the words not yet formed, or perhaps held back. The pause stretched, not uncomfortable, but deliberate, like a space being allowed to exist on its own terms. Colton watched her more closely now, his gaze narrowing just enough to register the shift, not in meaning, but in presence. He did not interrupt. He did not repeat himself. He simply waited, as if the moment belonged to him by default. Zoraya's hand moved, not toward the bill, not toward the slip, but to the empty glass nearest him. She adjusted it by a fraction of an inch, aligning it with the edge of the table, a small act of order placed into a space that had lost it. Her fingers lingered there for a brief second before withdrawing. Another breath, quieter this time. The city lights reflected faintly in the glass, breaking into thin lines that shifted as she moved. Moments like this do not need words. They stay longer than anything said. Zoraya straightened fully, the tray balanced again, her posture composed, her expression unchanged on the surface, but steadier now, as if something inside had settled into place. She did not rush. She did not retreat. She simply stood, present in the space, holding it without claiming it. Colton's gaze remained on her, longer now than before, not understanding, not conceding, but no longer dismissing her as quickly. The difference was small, almost invisible, but it existed. Around them, the rooftop resumed its distant rhythm, glasses clinking softly, voices returning in low tones, but the table remained its own center, quiet, contained, waiting. Zoraya did not fill the silence. She let it stand, measured and intact, before the next moment would decide what came after. The silence did not break the way it usually did. No one rushed to fill it. No one reached for a joke to smooth it over. The table held its shape, but something beneath it shifted, subtle and uneven. Colton's gaze remained on Zoraya, but it no longer moved past her. It stayed, not fixed, not confrontational, just longer than usual. His fingers, which had always found rhythm against the table, rested still now, the absence of movement more noticeable than the tapping had been. Zoraya did not change her posture. The tray remained balanced, her shoulders aligned, her breathing steady and controlled. She did not look at the bill again. She did not look at the slip. She did not look at him longer than necessary. She simply stood, the same as before, unchanged. That consistency lingered in the space. One of the men, At the table shifted in his seat, the sound of fabric against leather slightly louder than expected. Another reached for his glass, then paused, his hand hovering for a second before completing the motion. Small hesitations, scattered, unspoken. Colton's eyes moved briefly to the bill, then to the folded slip beside it. He did not pick it up. He did not ask about it. But his gaze stayed there a fraction longer than it had before, as if the placement itself carried weight he had not accounted for. He leaned back slightly, but not with the same ease as earlier. The movement lacked its usual certainty, stopping just short of where it would have before, as if something in the space resisted the full extension. His jaw shifted once, a subtle adjustment, then settled. Zariah's hand moved again, not toward him, not toward the table, but to the tray, adjusting its position by a fraction, maintaining balance. The motion was identical to the one she had made all night, precise, controlled, consistent. It did not ask for attention. It did not avoid it. It simply existed. Colton watched that movement, and for a brief second, his focus narrowed, not on her role, not on the context, but on the action itself. The way her hand did not rush. The way it did not hesitate. The way it did not change under pressure. His gaze lifted back to her face, but not with the same dismissal. There was a pause there, longer than any before, not filled with thought he could name, but not empty either. Around them, the rooftop noise returned in fragments, distant laughter, the soft clink of glass, the hum of conversation resuming in other corners, but none of it reached the table fully. It hovered at the edges, unable to settle. Victor remained still, his attention fixed, waiting for a signal that did not come. Colton's hand moved again, slowly this time, toward the glass in front of him. He lifted it, but did not drink immediately. The motion stopped halfway, the rim hovering just below his lips, as if the act itself had lost its automatic nature. He lowered it again, without taking a sip. His eyes shifted once more to the slip. Not reading it, not touching it, just acknowledging its presence in a way he had not before. Zariah did not move. She did not fill the space. She did not withdraw. She remained exactly as she had been, her stillness now more defined against the slight disruptions around her. Colton's posture adjusted again, a small shift forward, not aggressive, not engaged, just closer than before. The difference was measured in inches, but it altered the distance in a way that could not be ignored. His gaze held on her, not searching for a response, but no longer assuming one would not come. The imbalance he had controlled earlier no longer felt as clean. It did not collapse. It did not resolve. It simply lost its certainty. And in that loss, something unfamiliar settled in its place, quiet, unformed, but present enough that he did not look away as quickly as he had before. Colton's gaze did not leave the space in front of him, but it no longer rested on Zariah the same way. It moved in small, uncertain paths, from the edge of the glass to the folded slip, then back again, as if each object carried a detail he had overlooked. His hand hovered near the bill, not reaching, not withdrawing, caught between two instincts that no longer aligned cleanly. The air at the table had thinned, not with silence, but with something less defined, a quiet imbalance that refused to settle back into its earlier shape. Zariah remained still, her posture unchanged, her tray balanced with the same quiet precision. She did not shift her weight. She did not glance down. She did not adjust anything that did not require it. The consistency of her presence held its own line in the space, unaffected by the tension that had built around it. Colton's fingers moved again, but slower now, tracing a faint arc against the marble before stopping altogether. The motion lacked direction, as if the habit itself had lost purpose. His eyes returned to the slip, lingering there longer this time, not reading, not opening it, just acknowledging that it existed with intent. The placement had been deliberate. That much was clear now. The realization did not arrive as a thought, but as a disruption, small and persistent. He leaned forward slightly, not in control, not in challenge, but in proximity, as if the distance between him and the object had begun to matter in a way it had not before. The men around him shifted again, their attention no longer anchored to his cues. One of them reached for his phone, then set it back down without unlocking it. Another adjusted his watch, the gesture slower, less certain. The rhythm of the table no longer followed a single center. Colton's jaw tightened, then released, The movement subtle but repeated once, as if something internal resisted settling. His eyes lifted toward Zariah again, but not with dismissal, not with expectation, just with a quiet search for something that did not present itself. She did not meet his gaze fully. She did not avoid it either. Her eyes remained steady, aligned with the space, not offering, not withdrawing. The lack of response did not feel like defiance. It felt like she was not giving him anything to take. Colton's hand finally moved to the slip. His fingers touched the edge, not picking it up, just making contact. The paper did not shift. The moment stretched there, his hand resting against it, as if the act of lifting it required more than motion. He withdrew his hand slightly, then returned it, this time lifting the slip just enough to break its contact with the table before setting it back down again. The hesitation lingered in the air, heavier than any earlier command he had given. His attention drifted briefly to the skyline beyond the glass, the endless rows of light that usually aligned with his sense of scale, his control. Tonight, they felt distant, less precise, as if the clarity he associated with them had blurred at the edges. He looked back at the table, at the bill, at the slip, at the alignment that had not been there before she placed it. Zariah adjusted nothing. She did not fill the space. She did not move to resolve it. Her stillness remained consistent, unbroken, carrying the same quiet order into a moment that had lost its balance. Colton's posture shifted again, a slight lean back, but incomplete, stopping midway, as if the motion no longer fit. His gaze returned to her one more time, not to assert, not to dismiss, but to confirm something he had not yet named. The certainty he carried into the night had not disappeared. It had only fractured, just enough that he could no longer move through the moment without noticing the difference. The moment held, then slowly began to dissolve, not with a clear break, but with a quiet return of motion that did not restore what had been there before. Colton's hand remained near the slip, but he did not touch it again. The bill stayed where it had been placed, no longer at the center of the table, no longer a gesture, just an object without direction. His posture settled into the chair, but not fully, his shoulders resting without the same ease, his gaze drifting once more across the table, then past it, toward the glass railing where the city stretched beyond. The skyline blinked in steady intervals, red lights marking the tops of buildings, traffic lines flowing beneath, like something continuous and far removed. He watched it for a moment longer than necessary, his focus not fixed, just held there, as if the distance offered something the table no longer did. Around him, the others resumed their movements, quieter now, their voices returning in low tones that did not quite rise to the level they had before. A glass was lifted, set down, lifted again. A chair shifted slightly against the floor. Small sounds, contained, careful. None of them reached toward the center again. Zariah adjusted her grip on the tray once more, the motion steady, familiar, unchanged. She did not look at the table again. She did not look at Colton. She turned with the same measured pace she had carried all night, her steps even, her posture aligned, moving away without hesitation or pause. The space she left behind did not close immediately. It lingered, open, carrying the imprint of something that had not been resolved, only recognized in part. As she passed the service station, she placed the tray down, aligning it with the edge of the counter, her fingers pressing lightly along its surface before releasing. The movement was precise, controlled, complete. She reached for a clean glass, then another, continuing the rhythm of work that did not shift with the weight of the moment that had just passed. Behind her, Colton remained seated, his attention no longer anchored to the table in front of him. His eyes moved once more to the slip, then to the bill, then away again, as if the connection between them no longer held the same certainty. He did not call for her. He did not call for Victor. He did not speak. The absence of instruction settled into the space more noticeably than any command had before. The city lights reflected faintly across the marble surface, catching the edge of the bill, tracing a thin line along its corner before fading again. Nothing moved it. Nothing claimed it. It stayed there, untouched, carrying the shape of a moment that had shifted without noise. Zariah continued her work, her movements consistent, her presence steady, unchanged in a way that did not require acknowledgement. The distance between them remained, but it no longer felt fixed. It existed, quiet and visible, held in the space between where he sat and where she moved. What had not changed? If this moment stayed with you, share what you felt, stay with stories like this, and turn on notifications so you do not miss what comes next. Thank you.